and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who was right all along. There is a Turkish Super League highlight show on beIN Sports. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello, and I'm sorry I doubted you.
Hello. That's a very specific introduction.
It is.
I'm not used to this type of thing.
It was kind of the last thing we talked about before we hit record, right? Is that
okay.
we got a tweet from Ari Gold. I'm not sure if it's the real Ari Gold from Entourage.
Well, even that is not a real person, so
True.
there you go.
Yeah. Saying that, yes, there is a Turkish Super League highlight on beIN Sports.
See, actually, literally the last thing we talked about before we started recording was Portuguese pronunciation. So I'm assuming you just didn't want to go down that road to start the show.
Oh, if we want to talk Portuguese pronunciation, tomorrow's show, which is already in the can, as they say in the industry, they don't.
They don't.
Is me interviewing Tiago Estevão, who is a Portuguese writer and analyst about the Portuguese national team. It's the beginning of our World Cup previews. I think we're going to call it either the early World Cup preview shows or the premature previews for the World Cup.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you want to find out about the Portuguese national team in the build-up to the World Cup, listen to tomorrow's show. If you want some questions answered, listen to today's show. It's a listener question special.
It is indeed. We've got several to get to. Some required research, some required me to write more than just no.
Some required you to tilt your head sideways and have a bit of a think.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So shall we begin?
Let's do. We'll start with Connor Elliott, who asks, what is the difference between futsal and indoor soccer?
First of all, this is a very good question because I'll bet a lot of people will be wondering this same thing. The difference, correct me if I'm wrong, the difference between futsal and indoor soccer is walls and balls.
Yep. I mean, yes.
That's basically it,
the
right?
gist, yeah.
Walls and balls. So we'll start with walls, right? We play a lot of indoor soccer, Taylor, you and I. And I think the best way to explain it to an audience unfamiliar with it is that it has walls kind of like a hockey rink.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're playing, you can bounce the ball off the wall. The ball will stay in play if you hit a shot wide, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would argue less talented players in indoor soccer will try and get themselves out of trouble by just kicking the ball hard against the wall and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Worth noting, you do still have the nets there. So if you hit the net in the ceiling, or if you hit that on the sides, then it's a kick, but that's a kick from already a designated spot.
Yeah, well, that's
if
you hit the roof or if you hit it
Yeah.
quite high, right? There's nets around. But for the most part, you can hit it against the wall. You can even hit a shot wide. It'll hit the wall and bounce back, and maybe your team has another chance, right? If you play futsal, it is more similar to basketball in that there's a court marked out, and if the ball goes out of bounds, it's out of bounds. So if you get in trouble against the line, you can't be kicking it against the wall. You've got to use some skill or use some thinking to get your way out of it, and that's the key difference.
Right. And then with that, you have kick-ins, as far as I understand, from the spot where the ball goes out of bounds, which again is different than what I was saying with indoor, where if you hit the net on the side or if you hit the net on the ceiling, you have a free kick from a specific pre-designated spot on the field. You're not, it went out of bounds, so you're playing it in from there. It hit the net there, so you're playing it in from there. Whereas futsal, it's a bit more like soccer in that regard, except that it's kick-ins.
And so I would argue that even with the kick-ins, or if you're trying not to go out of bounds, it requires a lot more sort of bravery and getting yourself out of trouble and using your imagination to solve problems. You cannot just blast the ball against the wall. You've got to shoot on target, right? You don't get a second chance. It's not going to rebound back off the wall. If you shoot it wide, it's out of bounds. The goalkeeper gets to take it from there.
Right.
So even though it's a small court and you're close to goal all the time, you can't be taking shots willy-nilly because you'll be just giving the ball back to the other team.
This is true. And speaking of that ball that you've mentioned,
yes, I said walls and balls, right?
That ball is smaller and heavier. You're
Yes.
basically playing with a size 4 instead of a size 5, and usually it's a not underinflated, but it's a size 4 that basically has bounce restrictions, so it's not bouncing high the way a soccer ball
I would call it a low bounce ball, right? It just hits, it will bounce a little bit, but it's kind of what you'd call maybe the dead cat bounce, just a little bit, but not much.
Yep.
And to me, this makes it weirdly easier to control because it's not bouncing up all over the place, but also because it's smaller, it's harder to control. So it's a good balance between the two. And it makes sure, to me, when I've played, I haven't played much futsal, but I have played, it makes sure that the ball stays on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? You're not chasing around a bouncing ball all the time, so you end up with a lot of passing, a lot of sort of people rolling the ball with the sole of their foot. The ball just sticks to the floor a lot more.
Yeah, and I think it's especially harder to get it up in the air, and it's kind of not as incentivized to play it up in the air because it's a hard heavier like ball, so then if you're trying to head it, it's going to hurt a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever headed a futsal ball.
I'm not sure if I have.
I don't have any intention to either.
Maybe we've headed it too much, and that's how we don't remember. It's a possibility. There are other minor ones. I think you've got a fewer players on a futsal court, usually 5v5. Like where we play indoor, it's 7 players on the field, including goalkeepers.
That varies from sort of location to location, right? But futsal seems to be a uniform 5, right? Including the keeper, so 4 field players, 1 keeper.
You got it. Yeah. You've got, generally speaking, like a harder court. You don't always have the turf that you do with indoor.
That's such an obvious difference that I forgot. Yeah, it's almost like a hardwood floor that you play futsal on almost exclusively, right? At least here.
Yeah, it's much more akin to a basketball court.
Whereas indoor is like artificial turf a lot of the time. Yeah.
And then I have not played competitive futsal, so I cannot attest to this. But from what I
played
read,
in the World Cup.
Oh, you did? Okay, well there you go. Then you can attest to this. It sounds like they stop the clock as well. So there are clock stoppages for goals or for just stoppages of play. It's I think again similar to basketball in that regard. Again, I could be wrong.
All right, so I think, there we go, the differences between indoor football and futsal.
But I think those are the minor ones, the ones that I just ended with. I think you're correct. Walls and balls is the way to go.
Well, actually, the general thing I would say is the reason people say futsal is so good for developing players, and no one says playing in an indoor soccer league is good for developing the youth, is those restrictions that make you essentially have to play a lot more technical than you do with indoor soccer.
Yeah, actually, I kind of disagreed with you at first about like the shooting and it coming off the wall. But you really are right that in futsal, if you get under pressure, if you kick it out of bounds, well, then you've kicked it out of bounds. You've given them an opportunity, whereas with indoor,
your lack of skill is on display.
If you just bang it off the wall, it might still go to a player or to another teammate, or you can just hoof it up the field off the wall and you don't really get nearly as punished.
I mean, I'll be honest, I get frustrated when I'm playing on a team and someone will just bang it off the wall, because I think you're trusting to look at that point as opposed to doing something deliberate. But at the same time, I'll try not to use it, but if I get in trouble and say I can't find a pass up the line, I will bank it off the wall to try and get it to a teammate. The one thing I'll never do is just hit it as hard as I can against the wall. And if you're listening to this and you do this, try and be better.
Well, the one thing I'll say, and I'm not saying I do this very often, but like my brother-in-law, Evan, I remember, I would say famously in my mind, but he like knew the exact spot in the indoor facility where we played, where the wall would curve, where he could play it to himself. So he would play it past the defender to himself.
That's classic Evan,
and shoot.
right? Trying to find loopholes.
Well, no, but that's what I mean is that like it's no different to me than if you play pool and you know how to like hit off the opposite rail to have it come back.
Okay.
Like if you know your angles, I think the difference would be that if you have like the time to be able to spot, there's a defender in front of me, I have a player behind them, I know the angle to bank it, versus I'm under pressure, I'll just kick it and bank it off a wall as hard as I can.
There's a huge difference. If you are placing it in the way that you're describing Evan doing, and I have seen him do that, because we played on the same team as him for a long time. I think we won some championships.
We did.
So it worked enough to win championships.
With him scoring goals that way.
Yeah. But if you're just kick and hope, it's not so good. Fair?
But you are right that is very similar. No, kicking up is not fair, but also you're right that is very Evan to find the exact spot.
I mean that in a positive way as well.
As do I.
Mostly. So
let's move quickly on, shall we?
Second question. Evan, we hope we see you on Sunday. Second question comes from Costa Caliagas. He wants to know, which confederation wins a World Cup first? So obviously UEFA, CONMEBOL excluded from this because they've won World Cups. So which confederation wins a World Cup first? Is it CONCACAF? Is it the African Federation? Is it the Asian Federation? Or is it Oceania?
Ha, is what I say to that last one.
So it's not Oceania.
But I have to say,
unless New Zealand gets real good.
I have to say, and let me finish Costa before you turn this off. I hated this question because I liked this question so much. Because it was one where I put so much thought into it, and I still have no real answer for you. Because I just kept being like, but, and like I just kept going around in circles. So my answer is, I think statistically speaking, Africa, based on the number of teams that could potentially make it into the knockout rounds, like if you go by past performance. That said, I don't know if any of them will for the foreseeable future.
So what's your answer?
I think Africa is my short-term answer. I think so because what I mean statistically speaking is CONCACAF, this tournament notwithstanding, it is basically like Mexico are the ones that you look to, maybe Costa Rica to make a run. But again, it takes a special type of team to be able to win the World Cup. What, only 8 have done it so far, I think. Might be wrong. So I think like you look at the numbers that can make it out of the knockout round or do historically from Africa, and it just seems to me like they're the ones at least in the short term.
So the reason I don't think Africa, I'll give you my answer in a second, is because I think African qualification is so hard. that you don't get teams get to go repeatedly, right? Yeah. So like Egypt were a brilliant team in the 2010-ish era, 2008 even, didn't get to go to a World Cup. So sometimes the best African teams are not even at the World Cup, which is weird, right? Because they do have, I would say from all these confederations, they have the biggest names. The biggest name players play for African teams.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say it's CONCACAF, and I would say it's Mexico.
Okay.
Because Mexico consistently goes to the World Cup and has high-profile players and seems to be on the up all the time. And I think we've taken our eye off them a little bit because we're so focused on the USA. But I would say of all the nations you think about, from CONCACAF, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, Mexico may be the best equipped to win a World Cup.
Okay, let's talk about why then. Do you mean Mexico the federation or Mexico the current iteration?
Not necessarily the current iteration, just Mexico the national team in the future. Yeah.
So basically, you've taken this down to one national team.
Pretty much, because I think Mexico's the best team in CONCACAF right now. They're better than Costa Rica, for example. And I think there's sort of a successful, established soccer culture in Liga MX in a way that, like a really like well-regarded league in the way that maybe there isn't in other places, right? Yeah. Liga MX is better than, say, the J League in Japan or the A League in Australia. It has the best domestic league of any nation I can look at right now here.
You mean of these possible teams? I mean, I don't think I would argue with that. I think the thing it comes back to, though, for me, is that basically, again, this is kind of depressing given the situation with 2018, but like you're putting all your eggs in the Mexico basket going forward. It is sort of, even with CONCACAF, even if the United States qualifies for 2022 and other countries continue to get better, you really are still looking primarily at Mexico as your team.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think that was the thing that turned me off to CONCACAF, was just that with Africa, and I would say even with Asia, if you have those, specifically China, continuing to really put a ton of money into developing their league, developing young players, maybe you could see more development there.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very long term, right? So you're then supposing that China's investment pays off, and in the next 20 years, no one from CONCACAF or Africa will win a World Cup, which maybe isn't that far-fetched now, I'll say it out loud.
I mean, do you know how many teams that aren't South American or European have ever made the semifinals of a World Cup?
Or
at least, I think, at least in the last, since like 1990, but I'm pretty sure ever.
So South Korea definitely made it in 2002. Is that it?
That's it. So there you go. So that's why we're saying it's very difficult. And that was South Korea at home getting, I would say, some very favorable officiating decisions.
Fair. All right. To underline my Africa point, Cameroon in the Africa Cup of Nations did not qualify for the World Cup, correct? So I think there is always that weird sort of imbalance with Africa's representation at the World Cup.
Except that by all accounts, that was not a strong Cameroon team in relation to teams of the past. That was a fairly weak African Cup of Nations from everything I understand. So I don't think that it was necessarily they're the best team in Africa, best performing. It was they were the best in that tournament.
But
they've
had
that good.
The best recent tournament performance.
Yeah, I don't know if I put that much stock into those types of things. I mean,
fair.
Spain aside, you don't always have a team winning their Confederation tournament or whatever it is, and then necessarily winning the World Cup as a result.
Fair. And if you listen to tomorrow's interview with Thiago, you'll hear all about Portugal winning the Euros and how maybe they won't win the World Cup.
But it is, all right, we'll have to listen to that. But it is sort of depressing, I guess, kind of, a little bit.
The dominance of UEFA and CONMEBOL.
Yeah, because it really is, I was just looking around and realizing, African teams, I don't think you have enough. You always run into either bureaucratic issues or you have players playing all over the world. There tend to be feuds with coaches or problems with coaches or problems between players, and so you don't always have your full-strength teams there. And to your point, I mean, you don't have Ivory Coast and Ghana at this World Cup because they have so struggled to compete of late.
Okay, so it seems like the actual answer is none of them. We just expect UEFA and CONMEBOL to keep winning for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and again, I mean, up until recently, you didn't even have Spain winning. You only had a select few nations who consistently or historically won the World Cup. So it's not that surprising to say none of them for at least the next 20 or 30 years, I would say.
Wow.
But it's still sort of surprising when you actually think about it.
So 20 or 30 years sounds like a long time when you say it, but then 20 years is only 4 or 5 World Cups, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually not that many.
Yeah, and here is where my ignorance might be coming through, and I apologize if I'm totally wrong, but I would say even going back to 1992 and from then on, looking at and that's, I go to 1992 because that's the establishment of the Premier League. I can't really think of non-European or South American leagues, maybe MLS aside, that have really grown and grown and grown to that next level. Even MLS, I don't think, is at that like top tier level.
Yeah.
And that was 1992. That was a decent number of years ago. So I'm just saying that like it's not that big of a time period then to think about 20 or 30 years as like, well, we haven't had like huge gains where suddenly the Chinese Super League is this dominant force where everyone is heading. You don't really have that right now.
Fair enough. One thing we should add is Japan won the World Cup in 2011.
Yes.
Japan's women's team won the World Cup
that would
in
be the different side.
2011. Japan's men's team, I honestly don't know enough about right now. I feel like it's going to be a team that I'll research, hopefully interview a guest and really get familiar with them before the 2018 World Cup. But they might be a good shout as well. Maybe.
Japan? Well, the only thing I read a lot about this one. The only one I read was a couple different people very familiar with the J League saying essentially that it wasn't growing the way it was expected to, that it has sort of reached this peak where like they're getting kind of consistent attendance, they're producing a consistent level of player, but they're not moving to that next tier. I think similar.
Couldn't you say the same about like the Brazil League isn't sort of some runaway juggernaut, and yet or the Argentina League as well, but they keep producing enough players to win World Cups potentially?
Well, I think then you're comparing them. You're now comparing Brazil to Japan, and I think that's.
No, but what I'm saying is maybe domestic league isn't as important as.
No, but then you're going by foreign exports from that domestic league. And,
true,
and Brazil's are all going to play from like top tier teams.
So Neymar did start in Brazil.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough. Point taken. Should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Okay.
It comes from Guy Yedwab, and Daryl has looked into this one. So well done, Daryl Grove.
Well, at least I've thought about this one.
Guy says, I was watching an NYCFC game in person, and I noticed a pattern in how Maxi Morales plays and was wondering if there's a term for this style of play.
So if you're not familiar with Maxi Morales, he's the designated player who is sort of the number 10 for New York City FC.
He plays as the number 10 in a 4-3-3 when he gets the ball to transition from defense to attack. If he dribbles, he almost always dribbles laterally, left to right and right to left, not advancing very far up the field, and instead waiting for the attacking players to find space and opportunities. So my question is, says Guy, is there a term for this style of playmaking? What are the advantages or drawbacks of this approach, and are there other playmakers who played this way that you'd compare this to?
Okay, so here's my thought. The term for Maxi Morales' style of playmaking is patient possession.
Okay.
And I'm not sure that I've only ever seen Morales play for NYCFC under Patrick Vieira. Right? I haven't looked at him outside of that. When you watch NYCFC play under Patrick Vieira, possession is paramount. Right? It's all about keeping the ball, not giving it away cheaply. And I think that's why you see Maxi Morales dribble laterally, left to right, and hold on to the ball and be patient and wait for things to happen, as opposed to trying some sort of wonder ball. You know what I mean? He's not trying the sort of Sasha Cleston chip through three players type thing that other playmakers might do, because his instructions for this Patrick Vieira team are do not give possession away cheaply, keep possession, move the ball around. So I think that's the basic explanation for it. And then the sort of advantages and drawbacks are really all about the advantages and drawbacks of that New York City FC style, right? Which is that sometimes maybe you don't take the opposition by surprise and create chances out of nothing because you're so slow and patient. The advantage is that you have the ball for the most time and you can wear opponents down.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very simple and precise way to explain exactly what he's doing, which is essentially you're tasked with don't lose the ball. The easiest way to lose the ball is to aggressively press forward when maybe your team isn't ready, where you don't have the numbers to support that.
To try a ball that might come off, but it's like a 30% chance it might come off, and the statistical likelihood is you'll lose the ball. I think a good comparison player is Sasha Cleston.
Okay.
Sasha Cleston always tries the through ball, basically, which was great at New York Red Bulls when they were
so you're saying like counter comparison, not like similarity, but
no, comparison as in different. Contrast. Contrast is the word I'm looking for,
We're both searching for that word.
Good contrast is Sasha Cleston, because he would just always try the ball, and most of the time it wouldn't come off.
Yeah.
But if you do a highlight reel, it looks like it always comes off because he'll just keep finding the striker, like usually Bradley Wright Phillips or now Dom Dwyer.
I'm still laughing that neither one of us can figure out contrast. But yes, I think that is a very good point. And then, like, I would say this is going to be a controversial one, but I feel like any player you compare this to, it's going to be a player who is technically sound and trusted with not losing the ball, which tends to be a player that I think a lot of people would say, like, really? You think that's Maxi Morales? You sure about that one?
So I would say Luka Modric.
There we go.
Yeah, who plays a different position.
Yeah.
Basically, 'cause he plays deeper, but he does do a similar thing in terms of doesn't cough the ball up easily.
Yeah. I mean, and
the other obvious comparison is Josh Onoma.
Yes, of course. That's a good joke. That's a solid joke by you. But I mean, it is any player Who plays for a team where like the priority is to establish possession, to establish your dominance through possession, then if you are giving the ball away, you're going to see the coach lose their mind because they're relying on a specific player or a couple different players to always retain possession, and that tends to mean moving it from left to right and then getting everybody into the same rhythm, getting everybody into the exact right position before you then try to advance.
There we go. Ready for the next question?
I am, except to say that the other answer to this, which is far more obvious, is that Maxi Morales really grew up playing Mario Brothers and internalized the can only go right to left. That's it. So that's what I'm going to say, is basically.
The early version, so it's up to what, Mario 3? And after that, it gets a bit more 3D.
Yeah, I mean, he's retro, Maxi Morales.
He's retro. Yeah. He's got that NES. Okay, Jeff Moore has a question for you, for us, excuse me. Jeff says, my question for you is a bit of an oddball thought experiment, but here goes. Are you ready, Taylor?
I am.
Jeff says, I really enjoy watching the Argentinian tennis player Juan Martin del Potro. He's a tall guy at 6'6", but as a professional tennis player is extremely athletic for his size. My question is, if Del Potro was eligible for the roster and was willing to switch sports, could he play in goal for Argentina at the World Cup? No disrespect to Sergio Romero, of course. I think there's a little disrespect here.
I think there is.
But I see the skills and quickness required of pro tennis stars as being very similar to that required of a world-class keeper. So the question I get, the implicit question is, could we put Juan Martin del Potro, make him a goalkeeper today, give him 2 months, let's be generous and say 3 months, and get him trained up to play in the World Cup for Argentina because he's 6'6", he's an athlete, and presumably he's got, let's say he's got good reflexes and all the basic physical skills.
Okay, I've got a few different answers for you.
I've got one answer and then an explanation for it.
All right, I've got a few answers. They are no, nope, Those are pretty much them. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the obvious answer. But the more interesting stuff is why. Well, I mean, and I mean this respectfully. Why would Jeff ask this? Why would he think that someone who has not played in goal but has the physical attributes could go and play in goal for Argentina at the World Cup?
I mean, I think because when you boil a position down to like a few specific attributes, you can make stuff fit. Not necessarily saying that that's what Jeff is doing. I'm not trying to like disrespect Jeff here, but I'm saying that I think anytime you say like, oh, Daryl Grove, glasses, brown hair, sometimes like takes off a jacket, he's Superman. Like you can make these very specific things fit into stuff.
How did you figure it out?
I knew it this whole time. You finally took the glasses off and I realized. But so that's what I mean is I think when
he keeps using phone booths and yet he's got a cell phone. What's wrong with this guy?
I'm sure someone has made that joke before, but it must be really hard to be Superman nowadays because there are no phone booths around. He must like dash into alleyways. I don't know what he does. Iron Man's got this figured out, is I guess what I'm saying. But anyway, so I think when you look at like very tall, skinny, athletic, quick reflexes, like has a small object flying at him and has to like find a way to deflect it or keep it in play.
Yeah.
That does sound a little bit like a goalkeeper, but to think that way removes the many, many other aspects of goalkeeper training that I think would factor into this one.
I think that's exactly it. I think to be a goalkeeper at any professional level, not least World Cup level, it's not just about physical attributes, right? Because you could put him in goal and he could have the quickest reflexes in the world, and I mean that literally. He could have the world's fastest reflexes. It takes a lifetime of playing in goal to understand positioning, to understand footwork, to understand angles, to understand what to do in specific situations. Like when a striker's coming at you from an angle one-on-one, what's the correct way to approach him, when to get big, when to go down low, all that stuff. You can't just teach it in a week, right? You have to spend your whole life learning it by trial and error, by getting it wrong, by conceding goals, by working with goalkeeper coaches for your whole life. So just having the attributes doesn't mean you can do it straight away. Having the attributes means you then have to work really hard and learn all the lessons, and then maybe one day you get to play in a World Cup.
I was literally having this conversation with
get out of here, Del Potro.
I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day who is a trained goalkeeper who I think got injured and somebody else on his team had to hop in, and it was like the goal that they immediately conceded was he came out to challenge on a 1v1 and essentially had no idea where he was in relation to the goal and came running out and left the entire goal wide open and easily shot at because he thought he was covering the whole thing, but was actually covering, I guess, like the 6-yard box, something like that. So I think you're absolutely right. Like the angles and the ability to know in a half second where exactly you are and how to close down the angle, how to cut it off, that's important. The other one that I think people don't realize is to be a trained goalkeeper, like one thing you learn how to do when you do goalkeeper training is fall. It is really, really difficult to make some of the saves they make and land the way they do and not get injured.
And get get back up again.
Yeah,
so that's what we don't know.
Like core strength with that too. Yeah,
Del Potro doesn't have to do diving sort of volleys,
slamming into the ground,
or diving backhands, and then bounce up for the next one. He may have done it once or twice, but that's not a core skill he has to learn. We could find out that he doesn't have that ability. Right, that would be a key ability that he might not have. He might be scared to come for crosses. He might be bad at goal kicks. He might be terrible with his feet.
I have that exact thing written down, which is that, like, not disparaging tennis, but tennis is not an impact sport. And if you then have to be a goalkeeper, yes, he might be able to respond to an 100-mile-an-hour shot, whatever. But when that cross is coming in and he's got to be able to get people out of his way to meet it at the exact right moment, otherwise a free kick turns into a goal, looking your way, Alex Bono, then those are the things that maybe you don't necessarily know how to do. And interestingly, final thing is that I did some research on multi-sport athletes who have played tennis professionally.
Okay.
The one that kept coming up was, I believe it was Beckenbauer. No, it was Boris Becker. Excuse me, Boris Becker.
Boris Beckenbauer.
Yes, Boris Becker had a trial with Bayern Munich. But ended up obviously becoming a professional tennis player. Yep. And there are other ones, but the ones who
it worked out for him.
Professionally played both tennis and another sport, 7 of them, 5 of them were golf players. So then when you think about that, golf does make more sense, I think, because it's about hitting an object, but knowing like the velocity of your swing and exactly how you need to hit it, exactly the distance, how to read whatever's happening in this situation.
You're saying it's got more parallels, so it's maybe easier to learn the difference.
I think so.
Yeah. I've got a good analogy to close this.
The other ones were table tennis and floorball, by the way.
There we go. To really drive home the point, here's a good example. Taylor Rockwell, I would say that you have the attributes to be a lawyer. Right, you're good at research. You're good at making arguments. You've got like a critical eye for things, which I think you demonstrate through watching soccer stuff. Right, so modesty aside, accept the idea that like you have the attributes to be a lawyer. Right, but I would not want you representing me in court tomorrow because you have had no legal training.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying.
You've got the key attributes that make you a potential lawyer. You have no legal training. You have no law degree. Therefore, you are never representing me in court.
Yes. First of all, that is a solid decision on your part. But second of all, I would take that one further. And I would say to go all the way back to the beginning of what I was saying, where you take those specific attributes, is like, I do think people think, oh, like majored in history, likes to argue, does research, that's a lawyer. But like my wife is in law school. When she was studying for the LSAT, I would look at questions with her. No idea. Don't get it. And then a huge part of like being a lawyer of law school is philosophy. You've got to be able to understand the nuances behind the argument. Those are things I'm not good at. So even if you have the things that maybe you could tick off, the other stuff that is far more important, maybe you don't tick those boxes off. And I would say that's where you maybe don't have Juan Martin del Potro becoming a goalkeeper.
So Sergio Romero is safe for now. But Jeff, sincerely, thank you for the question because it led to a very interesting conversation. It also kind of backdoor let us have the what if our best athletes played soccer conversation without talking about Americans. We talked about Argentinians instead. Yeah.
It always kind of looks weird, right? Whenever you see another, like in researching this one, like there's the photos of Steve Nash and Chad Ochocinco playing soccer, and it just always looks a little strange for a moment.
It's because you know them from doing something else, right?
I suppose that's true.
You're like, why isn't the ball in Steve Nash's hands?
I mean, I saw Usain Bolt play soccer. He scored a header for Dortmund.
Well, he didn't score for Dortmund. He scored in Dortmund practice.
Hey, that counts.
Pele would count it. We got more questions to get to, but first, today's show...
The FA would count it for Harry Kane.
Today's show is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves. You know Roughneck Scarves as long-time sponsors of the Total Soccer Show. We give them 2 thumbs up, 4 if we both do it.
Because they're the official scarf provider of U.S. Soccer, MLS, NCAA, and the USL.
They certainly are. So you get all kinds of American scarves, but you can also get international scarves. I'll be honest, this is the first time I had clicked on their international scarf section. It has multiple pages. It has teams that are going to the World Cup, teams that aren't going to the World Cup.
I'm pretty sure you and I have had this conversation on air before.
Oh, really?
But it was a long... I think it might have been when they first became a sponsor, and we were like, whoa, they have a ton of scarves. We should probably incorporate that into an ad at some point. And then we got excited to come up with our own Twitter questions instead.
So if you were looking to buy an international scarf, you can, for example, get an Iceland scarf with Iceland in English, or you can get it in Icelandic, where it's spelled kind of like Island.
Or Island.
That's Islan. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's not how they pronounce it. No.
I don't think so, no.
There is not a free pronunciation guide with every scarf. But you can get scarves for all kinds of national teams at Roughneck Scarves.
But now I'm wondering if Iceland is actually named after it being an island. Now I'm shocked.
I'm certain it is.
Really?
Yeah.
I just assumed it was... Because I always, you grew up with like the Iceland is actually green and Greenland is actually ice.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering, are you just an island? Is that where the island? Is that what we're going with here? Okay, I'm confused.
It could be.
I'll be silent for a moment.
The other thing you can do with Roughneck Scarves is you can create custom scarves. So we asked our listeners, we asked on Twitter, if you were to design a Roughneck scarf to represent Manchester City's title-winning season, what would it look like? We got many, many answers. We got way too many to read, but we have picked 4 out to read on today's show.
We have indeed, starting with Cole Robinson. Just a black rose and skull, so when worn around the neck, I would just look like Ederson.
That is a brilliant idea, right? Because it is kind of... I've seen enough of Ederson this season that has become sort of iconic. Is that Ederson neck tattoo ready to go?
Yeah, and he'll probably be wearing that same scarf in Brazil when he sits on the bench.
Oh. Mark Brzezinski says, on one side, it would be the many faces of Pep's tactical disapproval despite winning 4-1. I've seen that a lot this season. On the other side, would have John Stones sitting on the bench looking sad, surrounded by his teammates celebrating. That's worrisome to me. I did some research into this, actually. Apparently, Stones had a concussion recently, and he was supposed to be playing in recent weeks, but Guardiola didn't risk it because he'd recently had a concussion.
You feel better?
So I feel better that he's not as out of favour as I feared that he was. I'm also optimistic that going into the final stretch of the season, we might see, now they've won the league, we might see John Stones get some much-needed minutes ahead of the World Cup.
That is a weird... I totally am with you the entire way, but it is a weird thing to do, to be like, don't worry, it's not that he's out of form or out of favour, it's just that he has a concussion.
Right. True.
That's kind of bad too.
Yeah.
Joe Augusto says, quotes from the English media saying Pep can't be successful in England playing the style of football he plays on one side, and Pep giving an ironic smirk and a thumbs up on the other side.
That's a pretty good scarf. I like that idea. Final one today is from Landon Cotham, who says, is it possible to make one side of the scarf bold and the other side ginger? So this took me a while to figure out, but I think I know what it is.
Okay.
I think it's David Silva on one side and Kevin De Bruyne on the other side.
I think you are correct. I also believe that Roughneck Scarves responded to say yes.
No, which is quite a technical challenge they've set for themselves there.
Hey, they're talented.
Well, if you would like to shop at roughneckscarves.com, the good news is you can get any scarf that you find at the store, roughneckscarves.com, including those international scarves. If you use the code Total Soccer Show, you get 20% off anything you buy. That's Total Soccer Show, all one word, for 20% off at roughneckscarves.com.
So thank you to Roughneck Scarves for, as ever, sponsoring today's episode of the Total Soccer Show. Now back to some listener questions. Up next, we've got one from Will Herson, who asks... maybe with a little bit of the TSS Scouting Network in mind, does Ryan Sessegnon have a chance to make England's World Cup team? What are some of the most memorable shock roster inclusions or omissions in recent history? So for those who don't know, Will scouts Ryan Sessegnon, has a vested interest.
Make that connection, yes.
Yeah, has a vested interest both in Sessegnon's career, but also in him maybe getting to go to a World Cup.
Would you like me to answer first?
Sure.
He does not have a chance to make England's World Cup squad, not least because I've seen some quotes from Gareth Southgate, sort of, I think, round about the March friendlies, which would have been the time to call him up and give him a run out, because that's the last friendly before the preliminary rosters have to be named. Southgate basically said, he's going to be part of my team after the World Cup, assuming he's playing in the Premier League next season. So that seems to say to me that Gareth Southgate is saying he hasn't played in the Premier League, he's only 17, therefore... there is no need to call him up for this England team.
Yeah.
Right? And just to give if anyone doesn't know, Ryan Sessegnon is 17 years old, plays like left wing for Fulham, but can theoretically play anywhere up and down that left side, was the Championship Player of the Season this year, has been absolutely lighting it up for Fulham in the Championship.
You are correct, my friend.
Yeah.
But that leads me to a question for you. My friend Trey, who's a Liverpool fan, asked me, do you think there's a chance that Trent Alexander-Arnold gets either in the World Cup squad or maybe gets some looks from Gareth Southgate before he announces the provisional roster or gets included in that provisional roster?
He definitely doesn't get any looks before the provisional roster is announced because you have to do it before the next games are played.
Right.
But I think there's a chance.
That limits that, I guess.
It does limit that. But so to Trent Alexander-Arnold, maybe I'll come back to that in a second.
Yeah.
Here's the point. Ryan Sessegnon plays like left wing of a front three, so like left forward for Fulham, right? England are essentially playing a 3-4-3. Right. So he would have to play left wing back, essentially. Left mid, left back, left wing back, right? Which he can play there and he has played there, but his really successful Player of the Year stuff for Fulham has been as like the attacking left-sided forward. So to take this 17-year-old kid who's never played in the Premier League and say, hey, you're going to go to the World Cup and you're going to play not in the position where you've impressed everybody, and there's going to be the responsibility of the entire left side is going to be on you. that's too much for a 17-year-old kid, right?
Yeah.
There is no need to do it.
I'm going to paraphrase Tata Martino here and just say he's 17.
Exactly. And then you've also got Danny Rose, Ryan Bertrand, plenty of other left wing backs, Ashley Young, maybe Fabian Delph. There's plenty of competition on that left side. We don't need to throw Ryan Sessegnon in there just yet.
Okay.
So there's my answer.
Okay.
Pretty forceful answer.
I would agree with everything you said, but I do still want to know about Trent Alexander-Arnold.
So I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there's also competition on the right-hand side, right? But Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think, has come into his own, especially in the last couple of months. So I think maybe there's a chance that he gets named to the provisional roster and does get a run out before the World Cup, and then we can see maybe he doesn't make it, maybe he does. But it would be weird to not give him a go right now.
I think so, because I think the point Trey was making was you've got Kyle Walker as your obvious right back, but outside of that...
And Kyle Walker's playing right centre-back at the moment.
There is... England. For England, that's right. So I didn't think about that.
Trippier is the first choice right-sided player. Ashley Young seems to be could do either side, so he's
But he's been playing left-back for United, so who
But he's very
right-footed. All right, so we may see Alexander-Arnold in that provisional roster.
I'd be interested in seeing him.
All right. But to the second part of Will's question, what are some of the most memorable shock roster inclusions or omissions in recent history is another key one there. I would say, first of all, I think maybe you're going to completely disagree. I think it's far easier to find omissions than inclusions.
Yeah.
Because I think, generally speaking, the shock inclusions are the 23rd name on the roster. And so even if they were surprising at the moment that roster is named, when it comes to the tournament, they probably tend to get lost in the shuffle because maybe they don't always get minutes. With that in mind, the one I have is a shock inclusion. Do you have one that's a shock inclusion?
Yeah.
I bet it's the same one. But who have you got?
Is it from 2006?
It sure is.
Is it Theo Walcott?
It sure is.
And Aaron Lennon. Both
I forgot about Aaron Lennon.
16 and 17, I think, at the time of naming it. They were both included in the 2006 World Cup squad. I think maybe Lennon got some minutes, maybe he didn't. I don't think anyone played.
Walcott did not play.
Walcott definitely did not play.
But had only just turned 17.
And Michael Owen was injured in that tournament. I think Rooney wasn't in great shape either. So England burned 2 spots on 2 teenagers that turned out to not be ready to play in the tournament.
Walcott was on the bench but did not play.
It was both an inclusion and a mistake in terms of Walcott and Aaron Lennon.
Yes.
Yeah?
Do you have other inclusions aside from those two? I've got mostly omissions after
I've got mostly omissions as well.
All right.
And by mostly, I mean all.
Okay, well then, I've got, I'll start with maybe a lesser known one, at least to me. Fernando Redondo was a big one, left off of Argentina's squad in 1998 because he would not cut his hair. There was a rule in place. I forget who the manager was, but the rule which, it goes from sort of I guess I can understand that to oh, you're just a terrible person, was no long hair, no jewelry, and no homosexuals was the official rule for the 1998 Argentina squad.
Wow.
So Fernando Redondo refused to cut his hair in protest, was not included in the squad.
I wish England had beat them now.
Yes, exactly. And then there's another major one from 1998.
Is it Gaza?
No.
Well, that's the major one in England.
Oh.
Gaza was sort of the hero of Euro 96, was in decent form going into 98. Coach Glenn Hoddle just decided... I mean, Gaza is kind of a wild card, right? He would occasionally just go out drinking all night or something like that. Just left him out of the squad entirely. It was the biggest story in England for a month when Gaza was left out of the World Cup squad.
Yeah.
David Batty went instead.
Take a moment to think about where I'm coming from for a second.
Okay.
1998... Someone left off of a roster. There we go. John Harkes would be the biggest one, I think, that I can remember just being completely stunned by that one.
Are you sure?
Yes, more so than Landon Donovan was John Harkes. Yes.
I think Landon Donovan...
John Harkes was the captain for life of the U.S. national team at that point.
Fair enough.
And again, this was way before we had constant 24-hour soccer coverage where we had Reddit that had all the different theories and different little links to stories. It was this what? He was this guy. He was the captain. Suddenly he's not there. And no one knew why. And
now we know why.
Now we know why. But for the longest time we didn't. And it just seemed like this crazy decision by Steve Sampson. Now we know why. And we know that it was kind of a gutsy decision by Steve Sampson and by the rest of the team to kind of keep it quiet.
So we won't go into detail about it. But if you want to find out why John Harkes was left off the 98 World Cup roster, you can definitely Google it and find out all about it.
You sure can.
Right.
But yeah, the other one that you alluded to, Landon Donovan in 2010. I mean, we did an emergency podcast about it because I remember I was at the bar and got a text from you saying, World Cup roster out, go home, we have to talk, basically.
Did I say 2010 as well? I meant 2014.
Oh, I think I said 20. I can't remember who did.
I said 2010. It was 2014.
Okay, I have 2014 in my notes.
Let's see. see how many people do you think would have tweeted, actually, it was 2014 at us?
I feel the need to now tweet a photo of my notes so everybody knows that I'm not a fool. Because I'm fairly confident he was there in 2010. Algeria will probably remember his performance.
All right, thank you, Will, for that question. Ready for the next one, Tyler?
Sure.
Comes from Ken Klein. Ken wants to know, why is Liverpool favoured over Roma in the Champions League semi-final? The two teams are in similar league positions, both in the top four but 20-ish points back from the top. Both beat theoretically superior opponents in the quarter-finals, right? Liverpool beat Man City, Roma beat Barcelona. Liverpool won a group that included Sevilla and Spartak Moscow, whereas Roma won a group that included Chelsea and Atletico Madrid. Ken says, as a Roma fan, I too feel that Liverpool is favoured, as in are the favourite team. But intellectually, I am not sure why. Can you help explain?
Sure. I think I can. And I think I have a couple answers to this. The first one is that I think when you look at it, generally speaking, I think people perceive the Premier League to be a stronger league. So to be an exciting team that's competing for, well, top four, not the championship, I think maybe that's where people think like, oh, they're in the top four. They're theoretically going to challenge next season, so they're perceived as a stronger team. I think a big part of it, the second thing I would say, is that I think they're favored. I haven't looked at like the global betting odds or anything like that, but my assumption is that...
But we would agree with Ken's, what's the word? Supposition?
Yeah.
That Liverpool seem to be the favourites, and everyone has this weird feeling that Roma are the slight underdogs in this semi-final.
No, I agree with you. The thing I'm going to say is yes, according to English language media. And I think that's a big part of it, is that...
What are they saying in Italy?
What
El Tempo saying?
I do not know that, but I think that probably factors into it too, that we have this idea... We speak English, we watch the Premier League, it's the best league in the world. So any team that's from the Premier League is automatically going to be favored. Yeah. And I think with that comes the third thing. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm not making this comparison. I'm just saying it is, I think, a rough analogy would be, do you remember when the U.S. played Argentina in Copa America Centenario?
In the semi-final?
Yes. And everybody...
I've tried to have it erased, but...
And of the four people making predictions in the Fox pregame show, do you remember how many picked the United States?
All of them except Fernando Fiore.
Correct. Who looked at them like, are you guys insane? And that's what I would say, is there's also an element of when you have a rooting interest, if you're covering that league, if you watch that league every weekend, you're going to be so much more familiar than you are with Roma that I think you're always going to gravitate towards that team where you have an interest, where you have familiarity.
Okay. I would agree with everything you just said. With the exception that maybe the Fox soccer thing, that Fox Sports thing, they were sort of deliberately.
They knew what they were doing, yes. But it still annoyed me at the time to be like, don't do that. You are analysts. You know what you're doing.
Alexa, you know better. You've seen Messi play. I would say, yes, I agree with everything you just said. But in addition, I think it's about I think a lot about the hierarchy of clubs in terms of where players want to be. And if you think of Edin Dzeko was essentially rejected or, let go by a Premier League team, Manchester City, and sent to Roma. Mohamed Salah, after impressing at Roma, his next big career move for big money was to go to Liverpool.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the hierarchy of teams seems to go Roma, Premier League teams above, right? And specifically in Salah's case, Roma below, Liverpool above. And I think Salah is almost the best representation of Liverpool being a step above Roma, and that's why they're perceived as the overdogs.
Yeah, the overdogs. The favorite?
I like overdogs.
I mean, I think that's a better one too. But I think, and to that point, the other thing would be that I believe Salah made it clear that he only wanted to go to Liverpool, but I'm also fairly confident that Liverpool could have beaten out other suitors because they have a lot of money. Premiership clubs have tons and tons of money, so then you can always outspend. If you look at their wage bill, I would venture to guess without looking for sure that Liverpool pay more for their players. Premier League clubs on average pay more for their players than does Serie A. So I think, again, you're going to have that, they're paying more. They're able to buy like the exact player they want for however much money they want to spend. So then they probably look as the favorite.
But everything we just talked about,
to be the favorite,
So everything we just talked about is about perception, right? Because just because you spend the most money doesn't mean that you are the best team. So we're not saying that actually Liverpool are the better team and they're easily going to beat Roma. It's going to be a great semi-final, and it's going to happen next week, and we're going to be watching it and reviewing it on the Total Soccer Show.
Indeed. Because I do think like Roma, I was pretty interested. There's a good. There's a soccer podcast that you turned me on to that was it's just about European soccer. It's got like
is that BBC one?
Julien Laurent, yeah, I think it is. Yeah,
it's called Euro Football League.
There it is.
Not well named, but it's a really good show.
They got real feisty on the most recent one too.
Did they?
But
you're not thinking of it on the continent, right?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Okay. No. This one they got real feisty because one of them was definitely a Gigi Buffon fan, and it got weird. But their point was like,
was it the host? The host is a Juve fan.
I can't remember, but in this case. It was that basically there was this kind of debate, I guess, as to why Roma had sold Salah in the first place.
Right.
That, like, how can you sell this amazing player? Which, when I was listening to it, I was like, but he wasn't. Like, he's Mohamed Salah, but he was not Mohamed Salah when he was playing for Roma. But they also made the decision to sell him because he wasn't going to be able to play where he wanted to play because they were prioritizing Edin Dzeko in their system. And that was... They wanted to play the system, and so they got rid of a player who maybe didn't fit it as well as another player might have.
That's why they say so.
No, that's not what he said. He had 1 year left on his contract. He wasn't going to sign a new one. He wanted to move to Liverpool.
The middle thing you mentioned is the biggest thing.
Those are the biggest ones.
He wasn't going to sign a new contract.
I think when they were justifying it, they were also pointing out that the position where he has been able to thrive at Liverpool is not a position that was ever going to exist at Roma. But my point there is that it's because Roma have a specific system that they're trying to play that is working for them. So I think from a tactical standpoint, you're going to see a Roma team that is going to have very specific plans in place to shut down what Liverpool do, and I think it's going to be a very fascinating matchup as a result.
That's what we'll be watching. Mm-hmm. Final question.
I'm more excited. That's the tie that I'm most excited about. I'll put it that way.
Okay. What's the other one again?
Bayern Real Madrid.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
Shocker, right?
Final question on today's show comes from Jack Sugarman, and Jack wants to know, is there any specific history behind how the ends and stands are named in UK football grounds? Is this just specific to each club, as I would guess, or have some clubs decided to sell off the naming rights as they build new grounds? So before we answer, I just want to make clear, in case anyone doesn't know, you have your stadium, and then within it you have usually 4 stands or ends, and those each seem to have different names, and different teams do it differently. So what's your guess at the answer to this?
My guess is that you don't sell the individual stand, you sell the name to the stadium because that's the one where you're going to make the most money. That's where you have the most visibility. And then the point that you made off air, which I will either steal if you don't feel like saying or let you say, is essentially that if you are... the Emirates, and you're buying the naming rights to a stadium.
Arsenal Stadium, for example?
You're definitely not going to love if another airline buys a stand in that stadium, but you're also not going to love if every single stand has different sponsors' names on it, because now you, number one, don't get that prime billing,
right?
And number two, it kind of dilutes your investment a little bit.
And then what exactly are you sponsoring? Because the stadium is made up of the 4 stands. Yeah. So you have the naming rights to the whole thing. Yeah. And what you will see, especially in the UK, I don't really know how this works in other countries because I haven't looked, but each stand on the 4 sides will either have a name that is sort of geographic, or it's named after sort of a club legend, or in some cases both. Yeah,
so for example, at Old Trafford you have the Stretford end, and then you also have like the Sir Alex Ferguson stand.
There we go.
So you get those different things. You have the Kop at Liverpool, which is definitely not a corporate name.
It is not. Actually, I looked into this randomly. No one's ever asked us why are quite a few big stands called Kops.
Yeah.
And Liverpool's probably the most famous version. Apparently, this goes back to the Boer War, and there was an area where there was a battle. I think it was called Sion Kop, the Battle of Sion Kop. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly. Which was on a giant bank, and there were soldiers lined up on it, sort of, on the bank, as in like raised up on it. And so people started referring to large stands as Sion Kop, and then it became Kop.
I always forget that the Dutch fought the British in the Boer War, right?
There you go.
Right. I always forget these things. Yeah, in South Africa or in that area.
It's in South Africa,
yeah. Wow. All right. Learn something every day.
So that's why the Kop comes from.
As we always say, this is why I love listener questions, because I found myself reading, like, I've always wondered and yet never asked you why it's called Molineux. I know that now. I know why your home ground is called Molineux, Daryl Grove.
Well, speaking of Molineux is one that has a south bank and a north bank. But then, for example, the south bank is also the Sir Jack Hayward stand. So it was known colloquially as the south bank, because it was literally the stand, and it's at the stand as a bank, which is on the south side of the stadium, so it just got referred to as, hey, the South Bank.
Yep.
But then eventually it gets named after former club owner Sir Jack Hayward, so it's the Sir Jack Hayward stand as well.
There we are.
Yeah.
So you get those. You get some of the corporate ones, so you get the Reebok, where Bolton play. Then you get ones that are way more obvious that I never, ever put together, like, do you know Wigan Stadium?
The
DW Stadium.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. Do you know what DW stands for? I didn't put this one together. I think this was way back when. It might be the Majeski now or something like that.
I thought DW... Majeski's Reading.
Thank you.
I thought DW was the name of like the shoe company or the sportswear company that the Wigan owner owned.
Dave Whelan?
Yeah.
DW? Exactly. I'm not sure that's it, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, I see.
I've just quickly Googled. It's actually
Majeski is Reading. Yeah, sorry.
It's actually the Spion Cup. Spion, if anyone wants to look it up.
Okay.
It can also be, final thing that I did a bit of research on this, the names of stands can also just be after features within the stand. So at Arsenal, at Highbury and at the Emirates, there is the clock end, which obviously, I don't think it's an official designation, but there was an end where there was a big clock in it, and it just got referred to as the clock end.
I remember that specifically from Nick Hornby's book, Fever Pitch. Thank you, not the Jimmy Fallon movie, where he talks about like in the hooliganism of the Arsenal days that it was like clock end, do your job, because that was where the fighting would go down.
Oh, one last version of this I thought of is sometimes it's just named after a street. So, obviously the stadium has 4 sides, and so usually they're within cities. And so, for example, at Anfield, Liverpool, there's the Anfield Road stand because the road outside of it is Anfield Road. You've literally just a geographic marker of what's next to that stand.
Ellen Road? I forget.
That's the name of the whole stadium.
Yeah, so you get a bunch like that where it's the street around it.
But that's the name of the whole stadium. I'm talking about the individual stands.
I'm sorry. I got you.
So there's Anfield, but there's also Anfield Road is one of the stands.
And then where's the Anfield Wrap?
It's top of the charts. Is where it is. Number 1 in our hearts forever.
Forever. I still have that thing memorized, and I don't love that fact.
Well, thank you to Jack for that question. If you have questions for the Total Soccer Show, go to totalsoccershow.com/questions, plural, totalsoccershow.com/questions. There's a form there where you can leave a question and it will get to us. Once a week, more or less, is what we seem to be doing. We just pick out some of our favourites to answer, the ones that we think will be the most fun to answer on the show. We also, if you subscribe at $10 a month or more, we guarantee to answer one of your questions per month. If you'd like to subscribe to the show and support us, it's totalsoccershow.com/join.
And if your question were going to be something like, why does John Barnes try to rhyme his last name with bananas? The answer is we don't know.
But his name is John Barnes.
Yes. And when he does his thing, the crowd goes bananas.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for the Total Soccer Show's Character Network?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We have reports about promising young players from all over the world. Where are we starting? We're
starting with Patrick Snyder scouting Nick Tatagui, the 19-year-old American midfielder for Schalke.
Yeah.
It was reported that Nick trained with the Schalke first team during the last international break and was selected in the scuffed World Cup 2022 draft by Dylan Payne.
So that's the Scuffed podcast.
I'm guessing he's more excited about one of those than the other, but should be excited about both. On the field, Nick has 19 appearances and 4 goals so far with the Schalke U19s, who are currently top of the table.
I hope Dominic Tedesco is keeping an eye on him.
Yes.
Chris Goodwin is scouting Oren McKenzie-Gaines, a 20-year-old American attacker for Darmstadt. Oh no, things aren't going well for Darmstadt, are they? Chris says,
nor for McKenzie-Gaines or Oren Gaines.
Oh, so Mr. Gaines, as I believe we'll call him, hasn't played for Darmstadt since October, where he was subbed off at half-time. Chris hasn't been able to find much information on the youngster, aside from a Redditor who had some choice words. Quote, he's pretty bad, to be honest. Severe lack of technical ability. Can't pass, can't dribble, can't do anything except run fast. No idea how he made the 18 for the first couple of months of the season, unquote. I am not going to trust that Redditor.
I think that's fair, given the can't pass, can't dribble, because that seems a bit much. If you had said not technically proficient, stands out like a sore thumb, maybe I would agree with you there.
Also, I've seen highlights of Oren McKenzie-Gaines, and he can pass and he can dribble.
Well, there we go.
So I saw him dribble down the line and put a cross in, and Darmstadt scored.
See?
Yeah.
So maybe not all bleak. Daniel Landau, scouting Giovanni Reina, 16-year-old American forward for NYCFC and the U.S. U17s. Reina was named to the U.S. U17 squad for the Sport Chain Cup in Spain. If you'd like to hear more about that, Travis Clark and I discussed it on the latest episode of the Top Drawer Soccer Show. This U17 squad is basically the same group that won the Torneo delle Nazioni last year, beating England 2-1 in the final with goals from Reina and NYCFC homegrown Joe Scally, who is also in this current squad. Reina is consistently listed as a forward on USMNT rosters. However, he has played as an attacking midfielder in every game that Daniel has seen him play.
Same here. So midfield 3, there's a holding midfielder and 2 number 8s, and Gio Reyna is usually one of those number 8s.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay, Jake Lamar is scouting Austin Trusty, the 19-year-old American centre-back for the Philadelphia Union. Jake says Austin Trusty went the full 90 in the 2-0 loss at home to Orlando City. The backline did not function as a unit as they let Dom Dwyer tiptoe through for the first half and failed to tackle Chris Muller for the second, though that was mostly Matt Rael and Jack Elliott's error. This team looks divided between the back four and the front six in terms of fluidity and who takes responsibility for lack of results. The play your kids think at Philadelphia seems to be wobbling a little bit.
But they're still young and they still have lots of time to get it right.
Also, it feels like this has happened twice because we've read two different scouting reports about Philly's 2-0 loss to Orlando, right? It's the same game. We've just reported on it
That
twice.
might be compounding things,
okay.
yes. Anurag Anjaria scouting Andrija Novakovic, I'm getting there eventually, 21-year-old American striker on loan at Telstar from Reading, who play in the Majeski Stadium. Daryl, I don't know if you knew that. I also called you Dadium for a moment
sure
there.
About
No, I'm not. Novakovic, see, you got me rattled. Continued his fine run of form last week, playing the full 90 minutes in both of Telstar's wins. He scored his 19th of the season with a nice chipped finish in the first game and won a penalty in the second. His movement looked good, and he got a lot of scoring opportunities that he unfortunately wasted, much like the rest of his team.
I can confirm it is the Majeski Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So, Telstar promoted already, or are they on the way?
I think they're on the way. I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm not sure. I'm confused by so many of the leagues that I'm not familiar with because, like, I was looking at Belgium, for example. We'll talk about them later on. That they're doing, like, they have that promotion, or they have the championship playoffs, but then they have a Europa League playoff spot too, where like 9 teams are competing for that. Leagues are weird.
So it's like a late season tournament to decide things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Russell Findlay is scouting Eric Palmer-Brown, the 20-year-old American centre-back on loan at Kortrijk from Manchester City. Russell says that Eric Palmer-Brown got his second start for Kortrijk this past Tuesday. He went 90 minutes for one of the club's most important games of the season, ended up being a 2-1 win for Kortrijk.
I didn't realize this was right here. This is what I was alluding to, that they're playing for like the top 6 in Belgium go for the like the championship and the Champions League spots, and then like the next 6 play for a Europa League spot. So that's what they're playing for.
So almost a wooden spoon, basically.
Exactly. Tristan Gilliland-Kunkel scouting Derek Jones, the 21-year-old American midfielder on loan at Bethlehem from the Philadelphia Union. Derek started his 4th match for the Steel on Sunday against FC Cincinnati, and the 71st minute was a great representation of his season so far. I have to say, I love this scouting report. Jones was caught ball watching on a cross from the corner, leaving him stranded between 2 attackers, who linked up easily to score the equalizer. Immediately from the restart, Jones took the ball, used some fancy footwork to get into an attacking position, but then ran out of steam and ideas and lost the ball. These inconsistencies in play seem to be the norm so far for him this season.
That's not how I thought this story was going to end.
No.
I thought it would end with a tale of redemption.
No, but I appreciate Tristan's like focusing on those sort of inconsistencies and being able to understand what he's doing that is maybe limiting him from getting minutes with the Union.
Agree. That is the type of observation that gets Christian Pulisic his dog back.
There we go.
Robert Newman is scouting Mason Mount. The 19-year-old English midfielder on loan at Vitesse from Chelsea. Aren't they all, Taylor? Aren't they all?
Pretty much. If I see Vitesse, I know.
Mount played a large part in Vitesse's 7-0 rout of Sparta Rotterdam over the weekend, contributing 2 assists. He now has 7 goals and 6 assists in 32 appearances this season. He's been linked with a loan move to the Bundesliga next season, very similar to what Chelsea did with Andreas Christensen. I've just realised Vitesse is like the proving ground. You don't get to go to Chelsea after that. You get to go to the Bundesliga.
Yeah, you get to go somewhere else. Dylan Veach scouting Kai Havertz, the 18-year-old
speaking of the Bundesliga,
German midfielder at Bayer Leverkusen. Kai became the youngest player to reach 50 appearances in Bundesliga history when he started against Frankfurt this past weekend. He did not disappoint on that day, producing 2 assists and an MLS assist in a 4-1 victory. For his first, Kai collected a poor clearance and sent in a perfect cross that Julian Brandt headed in for the equalizer. For his second, he put Kevin Volland in on goal with a nice outside-of-the-foot pass. And lastly, he played a beautiful cross-field pass from his own half to Bellarabi, who squared for Volland for Leverkusen's 4th, Volland's 3rd, so he got a hat trick. And Dylan was very much hoping that Bellarabi would shoot right away so that then Kai Havertz could just get a hat trick of assists.
So, Kai Havertz, I feel like Dylan sends us a report almost every week.
Yep.
Which, some scouts send reports about their players every week, and sometimes the players haven't done much, but it's good to get the update. I feel like Kai Havertz, we get a report every week, and he's done something amazing every week.
Pretty much.
This kid is unstoppable.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We'll see if he's unstoppable when it comes time to select the players for the German national team.
Yes.
That will be a big indicator.
I think there's too much competition, but surely in the future. You could think of Kai Havertz as like a Ryan Sessegnon type figure in that once the World Cup cycle is over and they start the next cycle in September 2018, you should expect to see Kai Havertz in there.
I'm sorry, Daryl. Did you just call him unstoppable?
Yeah.
Well, not making the roster would be stopped. So there we go.
Okay.
He's making that roster.
Speaking of unstoppable, I asked earlier, have Telstar been promoted yet? I kind of surreptitiously Googled the Eerste Divisie table. They're 6th. Even though Novakovic is scoring a load of goals, they're only 6th in the Dutch Eerste Divisie.
I think that would be the missed chances that were alluded to earlier.
Chris Davey is scouting Eric Aguirre, the 20-year-old Mexican left winger for Pachuca. Eric scored! 3 exclamation marks, says Chris. After lots of hard work in the first half, Eric Aguirre finished a Kaisuka Honda through ball with his first touch for Pachuca's second goal. Los Tuzos, which I guess is what Pachuca are called, went on to win 3-1.
Taylor Mukaria scouting Ademola Lookman, the 20-year-old English attacker on loan at RB Leipzig from Everton.
Englishman abroad.
Ademola Lookman came on at halftime and 5 minutes later scored the equalizing goal for RB Leipzig in their 1-1 draw away at Werder Bremen. With only 4 games left in the Bundesliga, Lookman's future is uncertain going into the summer. I'm assuming that is in relation to will he go back to Everton for another season? Will RB Leipzig try to sign him on a permanent deal, or will there be another loan in his future?
Anthony Smith is scouting Gonçalo Guedes, the 21-year-old Portuguese left winger on loan at Valencia from PSG. Guedes started and played well this weekend, but was unable to help Valencia snap Barcelona's unbeaten run in La Liga. Guedes has more assists, 8 this season, than any other Portuguese player in Europe's top 5 leagues. Guess who we talk about in the Thiago interview when we talk about the Portugal national team?
Ronaldo?
Yes. But also Guedes.
Right.
So we talk about whether Guedes will make the squad or not.
I was going law of averages there. Zach Lippert scouting Izzy Brown, the 21-year-old English attacker for Chelsea. 3 months after his ACL surgery, Izzy is running again, which puts him ahead of schedule for that type of injury. If everything continues to go well, he should be healthy by the start of next season, when he will likely be sent out on loan.
Steve Renard is scouting Yuri Tielemans, the 20-year-old Belgian midfielder for Monaco. Steve says Monsieur Tielemans subbed on in the 81st minute, so he was only on the field for the 7th and final PSG goal this past weekend. On that goal, of the 7 players closest to the ball in the box, 5 were from PSG. Tielemans was one of the 2 from Monaco, but he did little to help their cause. Perhaps the Monaco players were hoping the Parisians would get confused and run into each other.
That seems like a solid defense, and maybe what Monaco were actually employing.
I mean, they tried regular defending, and it wasn't working at that point.
I'm not sure they even tried regular defending. Gillian Avalon, final report, scouting Ronan Hale, the 19-year-old Irish forward on loan at Derry City from Birmingham City. I had to look Derry City up. I didn't know what it was.
Northern Ireland?
Yes, indeed, but they play in the Irish Premier Division, or whatever its official name is.
League of Ireland?
Sure, yep. Why not? Anyway, Derry City from Birmingham City, Ronan Hale. Ronan is now playing for the same team as his brother Rory, which is also the same club where his grandfather Danny Hale played, scoring over 100 goals in 3 seasons, including 45 in his debut season.
So his second and third seasons were quite disappointing, is what I'm hearing.
Slightly. Ronan probably won't make the 45-goal mark by the end of the loan, but he's the joint top scorer for the team with 5 goals in 9 matches.
Okay. Good work, Ronan Hale.
Yeah.
Thank you, and good work to everybody who sent in scouting reports. Always enjoy it. Thank you, Taylor Rockwell, for answering questions. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions as well.
We hope you've gone bananas for us.
So Taylor and I won't be back tomorrow, but my interview with Thiago about the Portuguese national team, the beginning of our World Cup preview, starts on Friday. So please download, please enjoy. And then Taylor and I will be back after the weekend to talk, FA Cup semi-finals, that's happening. Juve versus Napoli is happening, and a whole bunch of other soccer as well.
Did you see the results last night?
No.
Juve drew. Napoli won. 4-point difference now. 4-point difference in Serie A.
Very exciting.
And I believe at one point, Napoli were either drawing or losing, and Juve were winning. So it was like a 9-point gap. Somehow became a 4-point gap in like 7 minutes.
All right, we're going to do this business on air so that we don't forget. Let's make sure to set the DVR here in the office for that Juve versus Napoli game. All right.
We'll probably forget.
Oh, no, we will not. I will make sure to do that. Check back on Monday to see if we forgot. Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time. He's holding the remote right now to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.